Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum. This is Dr. Shahid Hussain. So far, we have discussed three important aspects of the New World Information and Communication Order, NWICO. And today we are going to discuss another very important aspect of the NWICO, and that is the concerns or the issues raised as part of the NWICO discussions. So, we will be focusing today that what were the main concerns, what are the main issues which were raised by the non-aligned countries, by the developing countries during the NWICO debates in the United Nations and UNESCO. Actually, a wide range of issues were raised as part of NWICO discussions. Some of these involved long-standing issues of the media coverage of the developing world and unbalanced flows of media influence. The most important issue or the concern was the media imperialism, which means that an unbalanced flow of mass media from the developed world to the less developed countries. Means there was one-way flow of information from the developed north or developed west towards the less developed countries. So it was depicting a scenario of media imperialism. Other issues involved new technologies with important military and commercial uses. Similarly, the developing world was likely to be marginalized by satellite and computer technologies. News reporting on the developing countries or the developing world reflects the priorities of the news agencies in London, Paris, and New York. At the time, four major news agencies controlled over 80% of the global news flow. And when we observe this scenario today as well, so I think there will be not too much difference as was the scenario in the 1970s. There are just few big wire services, big news agencies which are disseminating the global news. Then reporting of natural disasters and military coups rather than the fundamental realities. This was the main concern, that the more focus while covering the third world countries or the developing countries, so that the more focus was on the natural disasters and military coups, etc., and other bad sides of the rather than the positive aspects. Negative aspects were more they were framed, they were more highlighted, they were given a more portrayal as compared to the positive aspects. One very important aspect to be discussed here, to be mentioned here, is that Universal Declaration of Human Rights states that everyone has the right to seek, receive and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. This was used by the supporters to claim the NWICO discussions were at their core based upon human rights. So the basic motive or basic slogan of the non-aligned countries at the time of the NWICO discussion was that there should be equality in the resources, and even in there should be equality in the communication across the globe. Then another very important concern of the times was the cultural imperialism. Cultural imperialism, we have already talked about in our earlier discussions on the NWICO, that due to the import of the media content from the developed countries or the developed north, there was a cultural deterioration or the cultural decline in the developing countries. And similarly, there was an issue of media hegemony. Advertising agencies in the developed world have indirect but significant effects on the mass media in the developed countries. Some observers also judge that the messages of these advertisements to be inappropriate for the third world. An unfair division of the radio spectrum was another issue, was another concern which was put forth, which was talked about. A small number of developed countries controlled almost 90% of the radio spectrum. Much of this was for military use. Then there were similar concerns about the allocation of geostationary orbit, like the parking spots in the space for the satellites. Let me tell you that at the time only a small number of 12 countries had satellites, and it was not possible for developing countries to be allocated a space that they might need 10 years later. This might mean eventually getting a space that was more difficult and more expensive to operate. Similarly, the satellite broadcasting of television signals into the third world countries without prior permission was widely perceived as a threat to the national sovereignty and cultural deterioration. Furthermore, use of satellites to collect information on crops and natural resources in the third world at a time when most of the developing countries lacked the capacity to analyze this data for themselves. So this was another very important concern. At the time, most mainframe computers were located in the United States, and there were concerns about the location of databases, such as airline reservations, and the difficulty of developing countries catching up with the developed world's lead in computers. The protection of journalists from violence was also raised as an issue for discussion in the NWICO. As part of NWICO debates, there were suggestions for study on how to protect journalists and even to discipline journalists who broke generally recognized ethical standards. Here, let me tell you that Mustafa Masmoudi also raised some important issues in non-aligned symposiums. Some of them I'm going to share for better understanding of the concerns which were raised as part of the debates of NWICO. The first concern raised by the Mustafa Masmoudi was the quantitative imbalance of news. This imbalance is created by the disparity between the volume of news and information emanating from developed world and intended for the developing countries, and the volume of the flow in the opposite direction. Another concern raised by the Mustafa Masmoudi was the inequality in information resources. The Western information agencies have monopolized the world information resources, while developing countries have no means of protecting themselves against the information invasion of the West. Another very important issue that was raised by Mustafa Masmoudi was hegemony and a will to dominate. Hegemony and domination are found on financial, industrial, cultural, and technological power. Then, lack of information on the developing countries. This was another concern. International media give much more time and space to the stories of strikes, crises, street demonstrations, etc., but less time and space to the achievements and aspirations of the less developed countries in an objective way. Then another very important aspect which was highlighted by Mustafa Masmoudi was the survival of colonial era. So it was considered that the present day information system reflects a form of political, economic, and cultural colonialism. So these were some of the important aspects, some of the important issues and the concerns which were raised as part of the discussions regarding NWICO. I hope you people have got it. If you haven't subscribed my YouTube channel yet, do subscribe it. Also press the bell icon so that you may get the notification of all of my videos regularly. Inshallah, we shall meet very soon with another important aspect of NWICO. Till that time, take great care of yourself. Allah Hafiz.